Hello, welcome. Bienvenue à tous. Thank you for joining us for today's Tourism Town Hall. Before we start, just a reminder that we will have time at the end of this session for some Q&As. If you have any questions that you have not already sent to us in advance, please submit them through the Q&A interface, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. We will pick them up during the course of the presentations. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Chuck Davidson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be your moderator for today's town hall. My name is Chuck Davidson. I'm the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. The Chamber of Commerce in Manitoba, we represent 71 chambers and close to 10,000 businesses in the province, and we recognize the importance of the tourism industry to Manitoba's economy. Today's session will be recorded and made available on the TIAC website. The Tourism Town Hall is an event partnership between the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Destination Canada, and our host partner, Travel Manitoba. The Tourism Town Halls will provide an opportunity to engage small and medium-sized business owner-operators across our province to share information, to discuss policy work, and available COVID-19 relief and recovery resources. Town halls allow owner-operators to provide first-hand input on issues they are facing and hear from leading tourism organizations on the efforts being made to support tourism in Manitoba and across Canada. We are pleased that TIAC and our national partners at Destination Canada and the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada are here today, and we thank Travel Manitoba for joining us. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our audience for spending time with us for today's session. I know we've got hundreds of people that are on the board for today and submitting questions in advance for the group. As mentioned, you can also submit questions during the session via the Q&A, and depending on time, we'll try to get to as many as we can. So let's get started. We'll start the session by asking Colin Ferguson, the President and CEO of Travel Manitoba, to say a few words. And following Colin, we'll have a greeting from Charlotte Bell, the President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, and from Keith Henry, the President and CEO of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. After these greetings, we'll have short presentations from Gloria Laurie, the Senior Vice President for Marketing, Strategy, and Chief Marketing Officer of Destination Canada. And finally, after Gloria's presentation, Charlotte, Colin, David, and Keith will all be available to answer questions in our town hall session. Before I hand things over to Colin Ferguson, I would like to welcome the Honorable Ralph Eichler, the Minister of Economic Development and Training, for some introductory comments. Minister Eichler.
Well, thank you, Chuck. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to join you for today's Tourism Town Hall. This being Tourism Week, I want to thank Colin, Brigitte, and the team from Travel Manitoba. This has been an unprecedented time for Manitoba's tourism industry, along with so many other sectors of our economy. In this time of uncertainty and turmoil, our government is incredibly proud of the work Manitobans have done to rein in this pandemic so we can reopen our economy safely and securely. Since our economic roadmap for recovery was launched in April, we've seen our COVID-19 case numbers remain consistent. I am pleased to say that the discipline shown by Manitobans means that we can now consider moving to phase 2 of restoring services earlier than anticipated. Last week, gathering limits increased to 25 inside and 50 people outside. We'll soon be announcing further loosening of those restrictions in phase 2 by our Premier, probably in the next day or so. During these challenging times, our government is working to support businesses in all sectors, including tourism. Our Manitoba Gap Protection Program is providing $120 million in support to small and medium-sized businesses who are not eligible for federal program. This program addresses many tourism businesses. So far, the program has paid out $18 million to Manitoba businesses. Our Manitoba Student Recovery Jobs Plan encouraging the hiring of summer students, along with $7 per hour for student wage subsidy, totaling up to $5,000 in funding for up to 5 students per business. We know this will help many Manitoba tourism operations. Last week, our government announced the Manitoba Works Capital Incentive, a new approach to tax increment financing that levers incremental education property tax rebates to stimulate economic growth and job creation. This new program is another tool in Manitoba's investment support toolkit that will bring business, investments, and jobs to the province, demonstrating that our province continues to be open for business during these challenging economic times. We are confident that the programs we have put in place to support businesses, students and working parents, seniors, frontline workers, and more, that we are well on our way to restarting our economy thoughtfully and carefully, remaining vigilant to keep Manitobans safe. The tourism industry recovery plan that Travel Manitoba has developed is informed and guided by the extensive research undertaken by Destination Canada, will ensure that tourism industry not only survives this turbulent time, but thrives when it emerges a new path. Thank you again for the opportunity to join you today. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay for the entire session, but I wish you a productive and informative session. I want to pass on my thanks to Minister Jolie as well. She's been putting calls on weekly for us, where we're able to put information forward that we've heard from Manitobans. And it's nice to have a federal colleague that's open to working with us. I know, Colin, you and your team have done a fabulous job in reaching out to working with us and with the federal government. So thank you to you and your team for to get feedback to us. So have a good morning, everyone. We'll look forward to hearing what you have to say. I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but I do have another event I got to get to. So those are my comments. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Minister Eichler. And again, thank you for your government support of this tourism industry in Manitoba. We know that you've, since coming into office, you've adopted the 96.4 funding model and in fact, even increased it to 95.5 of late. So obviously we are strongly supportive of the tourism industry in Manitoba. So a big thank you to your government. And thank you again for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule during these challenging times to make time to join us today. So thank you again, Minister Eichler. At this point in time, I'm pleased to introduce Colin Ferguson, the President and CEO of Travel Manitoba, and he's just an all-around great guy as well. So Colin.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I really appreciate that. And always thank you to the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce for all the help and support that you provide the tourism industry and have provided. And it has been very, very together with everybody. Our partners, so our partners, closely with organizations to impact tourism industry. The background all and needs are unique. The next slide, please, Julie. The information you see in this slide.
Colin, we're having a little bit of challenge with your, as what we found on a lot of the Zoom calls, we're having a little bit of challenge from being able to hear you properly. So I think what we're going to do, let's take a quick break. Maybe we can see if we can fix Colin's audio. But in the meantime, why don't we, I'm going to suggest that we move to Charlotte Bell. Charlotte is the President and CEO of Tourism Industry Association of Canada to say a few words while we fix Colin's slides. Charlotte?
Charlotte, you're muted.
I'm so sorry about that. All right. So thank you, Chuck, Colin, and Minister Eichler. I'm very happy to be here today and to welcome you to this Tourism Town Hall. to talk about TIAC's advocacy on behalf of the tourism sector, and very excited to be here with my colleagues. Before I begin, I believe I'm supposed to cue a video from the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, the Honorable Mélanie Joly. I don't know if we're ready to do that at this point. Yes, we are. Great. Here we go.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. We know the tourism sector is really hard hit by the pandemic and the economic crisis. On le sait, le secteur touristique est vraiment très affecté par la pandémie et la crise économique. Et c'est exactement pourquoi on est là pour vous. We're there to help you because we heard from you that you needed support to pay your employees, pay rent, and have access to liquidities. That's why we came up with a wage subsidy until the end of August, a rent relief program, and also some liquidity through the SEBA account, the $40,000 loan. If you're still falling through the cracks, please come and see us through the regional development agencies, from ACOA in Atlantic Canada to Western Diversification in the West. Donc, si vous avez besoin d'aide et vous tombez encore entre les mailles du filet, venez nous voir via les agences de développement économique régional de l'APK dans l'Est jusqu'à DEC au Québec. Keep it up, guys. Merci. Bonjour.
All right. All right. So, good morning again. I know that this is Tourism Week and usually a time when we all come together to celebrate our accomplishments from the last year and also to ring in the high season, which is the summer, and this is just around the corner. But this year, things are really feeling quite different. But I want you to know that TIAC has been with you every step of the way, and we continue to advocate on your behalf, and we're going to continue to do that well into recovery. So next slide, Julie. So I know there may be some of you who are not totally familiar with TIAC and our work. You may or may not be a member of TIAC. So I'll just briefly tell you, our vision is to lead the Canadian tourism industry to be the most competitive in the world. And our mission is to be the voice of Canada's tourism industry and improve its global competitiveness as an international destination through leadership and advocacy. Next slide. So in normal times, we're focused on advocacy work to help strengthen the industry, to streamline visa application processes, get more money for Destination Canada's marketing initiatives, and a whole variety of things. But of course, we are, now I can't see this. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a technical issue here. So our current focus really is on gathering information, consulting industry through surveys, phone calls, and communications to inform on the sector's current needs and outlooks to prepare for losses in the upcoming season. And we've been very much focused on providing that information to government. And of course, we're working with government daily. We have calls with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, the Honorable Mélanie Joly, and her team. Global Affairs, we've also had lots of discussions with the Bank of Canada. So these are ongoing discussions. They're not once a week. We have discussions on a daily basis with a variety of government decision makers. We've been focused mostly on, well, asking for the initiatives that have been, or the programs that have been put into place to support the industry. So it started there, but then of course, every time a program comes into or is created, we also realize that there are gaps, and we know there have been a number of gaps. So we've been really focused on identifying what those gaps are and also providing information to government in terms of how to fix those gaps to ensure that more businesses are able to access funding and the programs. And of course, we are also planning on success post-COVID. Next slide. All right, thank you. Now I've listed some of the government support programs that are there for tourism businesses. And again, I I appreciate that not everyone can access all of these programs, and I'm really hoping that at least everyone can access some of this. You know, there's the Regional Development Agency support that was just launched last week. The wage subsidy has been extended. We've asked for that. We think this is really important. It's been extended to the end of August, and I'm really hoping, and I'm going to continue to push for this program, because I think it's so important for our industry, especially because it's going to need a long recovery, to extend this way past August and well into next year. Of course, there's the CEBA account. We have managed to get some changes made to that loan program because so many people did not qualify for it. So I'm hoping that that's opened things up. The business credit availability program. This is additional support through loans. We are still pushing to make these loans 100% backed by government. Currently, they are backed up to 80%. We know that some banks are nervous about lending to tourism businesses because they see them as high risk. We also are very cognizant of the fact that there are high interest rates with those loans. So we're still working on this. This is something that we're advocating for all the way through to recovery. This is liquidity, and it is the top priority for this industry right now, aside from going into recovery and having those measures. The Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. Now, this just opened up yesterday. We are going to be monitoring this very, very carefully to see what the uptake is, what the problems are. We have already identified, obviously, one problem, which is some landlords are not interested in participating in this program. So we're going to be watching this very closely and making recommendations to government to see how this could be addressed. Because again, rent is very, very important to our industry. And then of course, there's the large employer emergency financing facility that was launched maybe 10 days ago. And of course, we're also monitoring that. Next slide. So we're also planning for recovery. And we've, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just on the wrong, okay. So we partnered with a number of organizations, including our provincial partners in DC to monitor recovery trends. We also established an industry leaders committee representing many subsectors of the industry to make recommendations to government to support recovery and to have a streamlined recovery as soon as possible. So we're going to be releasing a very important document in the next few days, but I'm going to give you a few highlights because this is our plan for recovery. There are a number of themes that we developed in this plan. Here are a few highlights. Championing safety is going to be extremely important. So we're calling on coordinated efforts for developing a climate of public safety, including investments in process and infrastructure to keep Canadians and guests safe. And also a harmonized approach at the federal level with provincial governments reopening. This is something that we keep hearing about. We need coordination between the provinces and we need the federal government to be involved with that. So we are pushing very hard to see that happen. We think it's very important. Sustaining liquidity. As I said earlier, I think liquidity is of prime importance to this industry. And so we are asking, as I mentioned earlier, for changes to the BCAP program to ensure liquidity. We're also asking to extend the wage subsidy into next year, extend development grants for Indigenous businesses, which is very, very important. And I know Keith will be talking about this a little later. Permanently eliminate airport rents, waive commercial rents through all Crown corporations, and many, many other recommendations. We've also made a number of recommendations to help entice Canadians to travel and to explore Canada through either tax credits. We've also asked for reinstatement of the GST rebate for a little later on when, of course, we're welcoming back international tourists. Assistance programs for canceled fairs and festivals, as well as funding for meetings and conventions. This is a very robust document. It will become available, as I said, in the next few days. It will be available on our website. You're going to hear us talking about this a lot. So just follow us on Twitter, on our social media, follow our daily newsletter, because we will be announcing it there, and there will be quite a bit of noise about this. And we're going to be focusing a lot of our attention on recovery and working with government, and also our partners in the provinces, including Colin, who we have a tremendous relationship with. So looking forward to doing that. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to, again, close by reminding you to make sure that you are following our newsletter. We talk about our ongoing advocacy efforts every day. We talk about government announcements in case you've missed them, or because we are providing you with links. If you don't have a link or you don't have information about how to access something, then you can go there and click on the link and find that information. I think it's really important. So if you're not registered for our daily updates, please do so. The other thing is, as difficult a time as this is, and believe me, we feel your pain and we appreciate what you're going through. But there's also some good news stories throughout the sector of people giving back to the community. And so we've been highlighting those on a daily basis. And I'm so proud to see what businesses across the country are doing to continue to work with their community at this very difficult time for them. So we are also highlighting those. So again, please go to our website. We are updating very important links and tools on a daily basis. You can also find information on our social media. And again, if you're not registered for our daily newsletter, then please do so. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering your questions a little later. Thank you. So finally, Town Hall Series sponsors, Meetings Mean Business Canada, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, WestJet, and Air Canada. And here's a brief video from one of our sponsors, Meetings Mean Business Canada. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Tourism Week. As much as this is not how we all wanted to meet to celebrate the visitor economy, I hope that first and foremost, you and your family are healthy and staying well. I wish we could be meeting at the Forks, Grand Beach, or Churchill today rather than online. I'm certainly missing the amazing places in our country that we offer to visitors, especially this time of year. My name is Clark Gruey, and I'm proud to be the 2020 chair of Meetings Mean Business Canada. These are peculiar days for all of us as we make our way through the shock of the COVID-19 crisis. The business events segment has been shut down entirely for the past 2 months as our leaders in health and government struggle to find the right balance between safety and the economy. Ensuring that Canada is once again a beacon of safety and freedom while welcoming the world back to our country is a delicate but important balance. Meetings Mean Business Canada, in partnership with TIAC, have focused our advocacy efforts in the past few months towards providing a platform for elevating the awareness of the economic and social impact of business events to government, as well as the fact that Canadian professional standards for hosting conferences, conventions, exhibitions, and corporate meetings are truly world-class. In fact, many of our industry leaders are working hard on task forces to develop protocol recommendations for reopening the country to business events. These leaders continue to fight to inform regulatory bodies of the measures that can quickly be put into place by an industry that can control its delegates and all their interactions. This is what we do all the time. Meetings Mean Business Canada is encouraging all of our industry partners to support our efforts by communicating with local government and helping to spread the message about supporting our efforts to reopen the meetings and events industry. That said, today we'd like to recognize all of you and the contributions Manitoba makes to Canada's amazing visitor economy. You are the people who not only rely on this industry, but you're the people that make it happen. So thank you for all you do. I want to leave you now with a video that may seem a little nostalgic. This was developed last year to elevate awareness of how business events drive economic well-being for Canada. Now it reminds us of the importance of bringing these events back to our country so that they can once again stimulate the economy, create jobs, and engineer opportunities for Canadian businesses, Canadians, and our visitors. Happy Tourism Week, everyone.
I think when we're making big policy decisions in our country, it's really important that we are mindful of how big of a role the meetings and the convention industry has across our country.
At Marriott, meetings and events represent over 40% of our business.
Meetings and events are critical to the fabric of who we are and what we do.
Next year, we're going to host the World Agriculture North America Conference. We're hoping to bring one of the largest groups ever to St. John's, Newfoundland, to bring 1,500 people to your home province. What it means for the local economy, the restaurants, the hotels, all the local craft stores, the bakeries. It's a win-win-win.
Currently, I'm probably sitting around 35 to 40% within Canadian product, and my goal is to get to 70 to 80% sourced locally.
Our business has really grown because of how chefs have embraced the Eat Local, Eat Canadian movement. There's been a huge influx in our industry in growing produce for restaurants, for events. So our business of growing vegetables is expanding every year.
A lot of people who don't even know that they're part of the tourism business or the meetings business are experiencing great economic benefits because of meetings and conferences that take place here in our city.
When these conventions come in, it allows us that opportunity to bank some money, to upgrade, to do those changes that bring more opportunity for us. I can't stress enough what difference that makes.
The meeting business is very, very crucial to our industry. When we first opened our first business, we had like 12 employees, and now we have in excess of 200.
All right, a big thank you to Charlotte, as well as the work of TIAC during these challenging times. We're going to try again. I know Colin Ferguson has been patiently waiting. I think we've fixed his technical issues, and we're going to see if we can hear directly from Colin Ferguson. Fingers crossed, everyone. Technology, let's work for us this time. Colin Ferguson, President and CEO of Travel Manitoba.
Everybody, can you hear me, Chuck?
Loud and clear.
Oh, isn't that nice? Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. And thank you very much for each of you for joining us today for this virtual tourism town hall meeting. Are unique. Their challenges are unprecedented. The information you see on this slide is based on a recent assessment by Tourism Economics completed for Destination Canada. Is contained 25%. And as the industry rebuilds the 2021 year, a further 3.6% in losses will be seen once again as compared to those numbers of 2019. Under this scenario, the supply chain is mostly intact and travelers are responsive to appropriately targeted marketing content. Now, under the scenario where COVID is not contained until the fall, Manitoba regrettably sees a 60% decrease in tourism spending by 2020 and a further 19% for 2021, both compared to those numbers of 2019. And under this second scenario, with physical distancing lasting until September, the supply chain is substantially depleted, access remains impaired, and travelers are not immediately responsive to marketing content of any kind. The two is projected that between 6,800 and 11,000 jobs are expected to be lost in the Manitoba tourism sector. However, it is important to note that COVID-19 impacts on the tourism sector will change as the crisis evolves. The one thing that is clear is that the impact will be substantial. I'll go to the next slide. Now, is partners who are doing the very best. Enhance competitiveness of our offers. Instead, our building the tourism recovery plan is based on 3 phases. The first is to respond, the second to rebuild, and finally the third to restart. Next slide, Julie. This one is to respond. Since the pandemic, we've been communicating on a regular basis, not only sending out information, but seeking information from you as well to get a better understanding of your biggest challenges. And we are challenges as well as to our partners at TIAC and DC, both important allies in helping us preserve the tourism infrastructure. And while we paused our paid marketing campaigns, we have supported the stay home messaging on our social media and our website. Next slide, please. Our next phase is to rebuild, and this phase will focus on our in-province campaign, encouraging locals to explore their home province. Manitoba travelers are very important to our tourism economy, accounting for a majority of our visitation and expenditures. 84% of the pre-pandemic tourism spending in Manitoba was from domestic tourism. Hyperlocal tourism made up the largest portion of this spend, with $450 million spent on same-day travel within the province. Further, $417 million was spent on overnight travel by Manitobans within Manitoba. And a further $420 million in spending came from Canadian visitors from out of province. A focus on hyperlocal, local and overnight interprovincial travel has the potential to significantly impact local businesses and kickstart the tourism sector. The shift in focus will also help mitigate the loss of visitors and visitation from international markets in 2020. Now, in accordance with border closures and public health recommendations, we will be executing a campaign with a strong call to action for Manitobans to travel within the province. Home is where the heart is, aligns with our overarching brand, and is a natural next step following our stay home messaging that we have been running to date. Moving forward, we want to showcase the experiences that make us love Manitoba and the people we love to share them with, and encourage Manitobans to spend their summer here at home. Campaign tactics are scalable, allowing for speed of execution, building to paid advertising and content campaigns. Our campaign tactics will also allow us to pivot quickly should public health regulations change. And once travel restrictions are removed, our message will be modified to encourage close to home travel in near Northwestern Ontario. In addition to the resources that Travel Manitoba will be investing in the in-province campaign, there is an opportunity this year for the first time to gain additional support from Destination Canada to amplify our efforts. We are very excited about this opportunity, so a big thank you out to our partners at Destination Canada for this important partnership initiative. The next slide, please. Finally, restart, and when it is safe to do so. At this point, we will expand the campaign internationally, although we recognize that international travel beyond the US may likely not resume until 2021. We will restart activities with media and travel trade, and we will review our partnership models to develop more ways for partners to work with us at Travel Manitoba and Destination Canada. As a strategic partner for Manitoba's economic growth plan, Travel Manitoba is providing leadership in responding to the COVID crisis by developing and executing our recovery plan aimed at stimulating the tourism economy to recover $1.6 billion in revenues and some $290 million plus in provincial tax-based revenues. Now, despite the challenges, as the destination marketing and tourism research organization for our province, Travel Manitoba has a unique role to play in mitigating the impact to our visitor economy through our response and proactive recovery planning. This crisis is challenging us to work in a more nimble, a more flexible, and a more streamlined manner across all areas of the operation. And never has collaboration with our partnerships with government, both federal and provincial, with TIAC, Destination Canada, Tourism, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, Tourism Winnipeg, and Economic Development Winnipeg, and of course you, our valued industry, been more important. We are all in this together, and together we will show that Manitoba is where Canada's heart beats. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. We were a little challenged there. We thought you were having some audio challenges and we were going to have to cut you off, but then you wrapped it up and you brought it home with a photo of Wekusko Falls, so my hometown of Snow Lake. So there was no question in my mind that we were going to keep you going. At this point in time, I would now like to ask Keith Henry, the President and CEO of Indigenous Tourism Industry Association, to provide a short greeting. Keith?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Chuck. And it's great to be on the line, of course, with all of our partners here this morning. So I'm just going to quickly start going through the presentation in the interest of time. So maybe we'll go right to the next slide, please. So just a little bit about obviously Indigenous tourism, and in Manitoba, it's certainly feeling the challenges of what's happening across this country. And of course, Indigenous tourism, one of my key messages this morning at Manitoba, as well as every other part of the country, is we're seeing significant vulnerability within the sector. We have roughly 1,800 or so businesses across this country. We were having extremely strong growth, but certainly big challenges. So this is a little bit about what we know so far. About half of our businesses say they will make it through COVID-19. So it's not a ringing endorsement of the challenges. And I will say we continue to assess this. We've done 2 specific surveys with our membership, including a number of responses from Manitoba. So certainly we are seeing a significant risk to the stability of our industry right now in Manitoba and elsewhere. As it stands right now, we expect that 3,800 permanent and 1,600 non-permanent jobs have been lost so far as of April 2020, and we're going to continue to lose more. The total employment of our sector is roughly around 40,000 in this country, and within Manitoba itself, it's around 2,000. So you can see how the numbers will sort of, I guess, average out. Gaming and accommodation, Indigenous-owned casinos, and of course our Indigenous-owned hotels are the hardest hit sectors, followed by recreation, so hunting, fishing, art, and heritage. And specifically, that becomes a pretty significant challenge for Manitoba. There is a number of Indigenous outfitters that certainly will not see the U.S. market come back this year. That's going to significantly hurt, potentially permanently, their ability to maintain those operations going into the future. So what we think is the worst case scenario, if businesses and communities stay closed, we can expect that we're going to lose at least 280 million per month in GDP across the country, about 6% of that of which would be directly in Manitoba. That's so job losses and sales at the tills. So it's, we also expect that we could lose 800 or so of our 1,800 businesses. So pretty challenging times in front of us. Go to the next slide. So how have we responded? So these are significant challenges. So what we've done as a national organization, and we've been working with our partners across the country, we've revised our what we call our action plan. So this is available on our website at indgenoustourisim.ca. We've completely rewrote that in March because we were seeing the effects of what was unfolding. We're continuing ongoing research with the Conference Board of Canada to validate and verify these sort of findings of the internal surveying we've been doing with members. And You know, the other thing we've been trying to do in the midst of these challenging times, we've been doing things like the Indigenous Chef Cook-Off. It was a virtual culinary event. Some of you may have seen that only a short time ago. You know, Feast Cafe, their owner, Christina, she was instrumental in helping us with that, right out that, you know, that particular restaurant out of Winnipeg. So we've been trying to create at least more awareness during these challenging times. And we've also done things like the Virtually Yours video. And I'm going to go to the next slide, which I believe will just be a short presentation on that. So why don't we start with this first?
Time can be a test of our character, our nature, our spirit. For thousands of years and countless generations, our people have survived the tests of hardship and separation. And we will survive these times as well. And so will you. Although we dream of the times when we can explore and discover and experience, right now, we patiently pray for health and healing, and for wisdom to guide our decisions. Our future is grown from our past. And when the time comes to reconnect, we will do so with a stronger sense of community. We will be united in our desire to engage in experiences that bring us together. Our story awaits, and when the time is right, we welcome you to share in it. Virtually Yours, the Indigenous Tourism Experiences of Canada.
So go to the next slide. So some of the, I guess, hopefully you got a bit of sense. We're trying to continue to, I guess, raise that domestic awareness. We know that it'll be a Canadian-based economy as we phase back in across the country, and we're trying to help our businesses survive. The one thing that, you know, that video brought out is, you know, particularly just sensitive to our Indigenous communities is viruses have historically decimated our communities. And I'm from one, whether you're First Nation or Métis, that adds an extra wrinkle for us. And so in the midst of all the stimulus work that we see being done by the federal and provincial governments, there's a lot of community sensitivity about whether they want visitors back, even when provincial and federal governments look to reopen. This is a significant challenge for us, and it's true in Manitoba. It's true in many parts of the country where, for example, here in British Columbia, where I'm located with our office, there's many communities that are going above and beyond what the province is reopening, and the Indigenous communities where some of our businesses are located are not going to allow their area to reopen. So this adds an added wrinkle for us. It's a significant policy challenge for us in terms of trying to recuperate. So when we release our research, it's very sensitive to what are those possible scenarios if we can't even reopen a number of our businesses across this country and in Manitoba in 2020. So here's some of the things that we've been doing to try to respond to these challenges. We've been creating online webinars. We've had significant attendance on those. We've had national alignment at the provincial territorial table, and as obviously this is another case of that. And we're having ongoing dialogue. Like Charlotte, myself, we're on many calls with the federal policymakers on a weekly basis, trying to raise why a number of the programs that we see publicly announced by Prime Minister Trudeau may or may not be hitting the mark. And so these are things we're carrying on. Go to the next slide. We've created one of the most important tenets of our solutions has been what we're calling the stimulus grant process. We've come out with a complete plan that we've presented to the Finance Committee with the federal government. It's been based off 3 specific tactics. And the first one was to inject $25,000 grants into the Indigenous tourism businesses subject to available funding, of course. So we launched that as part of our recovery, and we've now been completing that intake. Manitoba had roughly 30 applications, and we've just gone through the first phase of approving a number of Manitoba businesses. So certainly that's a specific piece that we believe the liquidity issue is very significant for many of the Manitoba businesses. It's a developing sector in Manitoba, and a lot of the businesses just do not have the cash reserves or the maturity of their business yet to actually weather this storm financially. And getting loans, I know that seems to be the government of Canada's response, and it is for many of us, and we respect that. But for upstart businesses in the last 1 to 3, 4 years, which much of the work we're doing in Manitoba that's a very scary proposition for our business owners. So these are things that we're trying to tackle with, and this is one of those examples. Go to the next slide.
Hi, we're the Josie family, and we own Josie's Old Crow Adventures.
We want to say merci cho to the AITC for the COVID relief grant.
We were one of 94 businesses in Canada to receive a grant.
We started our business almost 3 years ago, and we prided ourselves in never going into debt.
We started small, and we grew.
This was a big year for us. We had been expanding to summer tours and started offering all-inclusive packages. Those steps had really increased our revenues and bookings, and we were gearing up for our best year yet.
Then COVID happened, and our community was shut down to tourists.
We refunded all our tours and deposits for the spring and summer season. We usually use our spring revenues to replace our gear that gets worn out or damaged, but with no revenues, it was looking bleak.
As we said before, we pride ourselves in never going into debt.
With no promises of when the world would reopen, we couldn't guarantee we would be able to pay back a loan, so many of the loan programs weren't a good fit for our business.
The AITC grant was perfect for us.
We thought we might have to close our business and find other work to pay the bills and feed our dog team during the pandemic. Now we can purchase a pallet of dog kibble, replace harnesses and dog lines, and we can increase our marketing and work on improving guest experiences.
This grant has enabled us to not only keep our regular employees working, but also hire a couple casual workers that we would have brought on to help with tours this season.
Merci cho to the Government of Canada and the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada for saving our business during the COVID pandemic.
So yes, thanks. And just to wrap it up, that video just wanted to give people a sense of the sentiment. There's a misconception, and the reason why the current liquidity issues are a big challenge. Banks don't lend to many of our Indigenous businesses very easily at the best of times. Many banks expect that communities will just backstop all of these loans, which is a very unrealistic business expectation. And these businesses are entrepreneurially run and owned. So there's real complications with the current liquidity solutions that we're trying to tackle. So just wanted to share that sentiment. So we've got a future in front of us, but it's going to be challenging to say the least. So I'll just leave it at there for now and say thanks to Travel Manitoba, TIAC, and all the partners on the call today.
Thank you very much, Keith, for your comments and your presentation. It was great to see those videos as well. At this point in time, I would now like to introduce Gloria Laurie, the Senior Vice President for Marketing, Strategy, and Chief Marketing Officer at Destination Canada, to give a brief presentation on Destination Canada's work during the crisis. Gloria?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you very much for having me. And I always appreciate being on a stage with my colleagues, Charlotte, Colin, Keith. It was nice to hear you, if not be able to see you. So if you just go to the next slide, I'll just open up. And my job today is to tell you a little bit about what Destination Canada is doing in terms of moving forward. And if you just advance, Julie, what you can see is I'm going to set up our challenge as we see it, and probably show you some examples you might not have seen, but certainly show you the alignment that we have with our provincial partners. So we know we're in this uncharted territory. And so what do you do when you're in that place? If you go forward, well, you build charts. And by no means do you need to read this slide. We'll certainly share it afterwards, but we had to build out a framework for that return. And Colin talked a lot about that hyper-local travel, and that's there in that first phase of recovery where people are starting to take 1 to 2 hour trips. And he also referenced those throughout the province trips, and that's where we're seeing that recovery right now. But we have to, I just want to emphasize 2 things. Our recovery is staged, but it is by no means elegant or linear, in that what you can tell is that, and Keith spoke to this, there's a real difference. So even in your own province, between the north and the south, a little difference in terms of recovery and ability to move around. And keeping in mind community sentiment. And then the other fact, even though we have a framework that goes from left to right, it's possible, and we all know this, that there could be a return to more travel restrictions depending on the advance of COVID. So think of it more of a radio dial that may have to go up and down. And having said that, this kind of framework helps us appreciate and understand what phase we're in. So if you go to the next slide. The other thing a framework like that does is helps us demonstrate the value of each of those phases. And even at that hyper-local phase, you can see within Canada, about a $14 billion revenue as a restart. And Colin dug very well into the way those numbers look for the province, and just the value of hyperlocal and local travel is really important in Manitoba. And then when you start moving into interprovincial, think of the value and the importance he outlined in terms of visits from other Canadians. So if you just go to the next slide. A map like this, I think, helps to emphasize some of what Keith was getting into. This is another way for us to chart and help explain the impact. And what you can see here, there's 2 main things. One is, this is the number of communities where there's over 10% employment directly as a result of tourism activities. And if you look at the darker circle, that's over 20%. So those are communities really reliant on tourism. And then when you look at those blue bubbles, those are the blue bubbles that have a 250-kilometer radius around them. In other words, they are well served by drive traffic. But if you look to in particular, the north, where we have a lot of Indigenous community product, or we have rural product, you can see that those communities aren't well served by a drive traffic. Some of them don't have roads at all. And then, as Keith added, the other complexity is community sentiment. Having said that, what this map also shows is the other side of that story, which is almost 800 communities are well served by a drive traffic. And again, underscoring then that hyper-local and local travel and the importance of it. So if you just advance. And it's so important to appreciate how the community sentiment is going to not just impact today, but over time. And so what we're doing is we're trying to understand how communities feel about welcoming in travel. And we're not just trying to think about it as one layer, but appreciate the differences between nearby communities or travelers from the US, as an example. So if you go to the next slide, you can see we've taken this survey, and we're trying to compare how welcoming the provinces are feeling. So it's not enough to say, here's how we feel in Canada. As you know, we have to divide this up. And then when you look at Saskatchewan and Manitoba in this survey, seeing that return to welcoming communities, 44% from nearby communities. This is something that we research over time, as I said, because we're expecting to see that sentiment increase. But what we've seen already in just the number of weeks that we've been doing this survey is those sentiments can go up or down depending on what people are seeing in the news. So we really have to pay attention to that. And as Keith outlined, we have to respect that a lot of areas, the Indigenous communities may choose to stay closed well beyond what you're seeing in the province overall. So if you go on to one more slide, you can also see how the farther away folks get, we can divide up and see the types of sentiment. So these are just examples of the research that we're producing and providing and working with industry in order to help businesses make some decisions and know whether they can be investing in a reopen. So if you go to the next slide. The other piece is beyond the sentiment is what kind of behaviors are we seeing or patterns that are different? Pretty much everything we knew about travel before, we have to put it to question and ask ourselves if that's still true. So a framework like this is really important for us to follow, to continue to get the data pulled in to see change over time, and then to share obviously with the industry itself. Some of the main signals that we're looking at are they come from forward bookings. We're looking at search and changes in search behavior. Those are good indicators of demand. And then, of course, talking about the different supply chains and what's available. When we're doing this, I refer it back to all the different phases. When we're seeing the data, we know which of those early phases we're on or not on. So if you go forward, Julie. So if we were to sum up the challenge, we could probably write a book of feeling how many different complexities there are. But in particular, it's our job to just try to mitigate right now on this restart the impact of the visitor economy that you heard stats from in the opening. We're also working really closely with our industry, and Colin referred to the collaboration between Travel Manitoba and Destination Canada to have a shared vision for the future and make sure that whatever we develop is flexible enough to respond to something that can change over time. And finally, really understanding, and I really love the way that when you saw the work of Home is Where the Heart Is, really understanding of who are we, what is that identity that we will carry through when COVID is over. So if we go to the next slide, that's that. At this point, I wanted to talk to you about our approach and how we are working with the kind of evidence that we've been gathering in this first phase. So if you go ahead. You saw the alignment, you can see it right here in terms of how we're all setting up our plans and looking at that response. And Julie, I'll just get you to click through these three just to show that and because it's enough to help you say that in that response phase, very similar to what you heard Colin talk about Travel Manitoba, in that we have to gather the evidence and shore up our reserves. So when we're in that yellow bar, you can see that we're in that restart, starting to open back up. We all shut down our paid media, looking at recovering that. And then if on the far right, building towards that resilience and trying to understand when the time is right, how do we work together to get into the US or other international markets? So if you go forward one more. The plan that we have, if you just advance it, no matter what phase we're in, the results are not changing. The outcomes that we need, do need to see that and recognize that communities are welcoming visitors. We need to ensure that visitors know what experiences they can do. We want to see that spend returning, particularly the emphasis right now on those local businesses. People traveling to other communities within Canada, we know that travel from outside Manitoba is a huge revenue, in that when people travel farther away, they tend to spend more than they would just on day trips, obviously, within their own province. And finally, that the health and safety guidelines are clear. People know how to enjoy their travel safely. So if you advance, knowing those are the results, it's very clear that we have to have a collective effort. And at this time, when we think about roles and responsibilities, they're a little bit different. And interestingly enough, Destination Canada's leadership role is taking a different pace at each one of these phases. So if you go and advance one, what we've tried to map out here is on the far left, having the communities and their voices lead the recovery. Given all those complexities and the sensitivities that we've all been talking about so far in this town hall, you have to appreciate and allow the voices of the communities to come forward. But it's those very communities and a lot of the cities who've been decimated if they're relying on things such as a hotel tax. And so we're partnering with the provinces to make sure that funds get out into the community so that a provincial campaign will help large and small communities, but as well that they can recover in a way that makes up for some of the funds they lost through some of as a result of COVID. When it comes to the national campaign, looking at the middle, Destination Canada at that time will have an opportunity to lead a national campaign. We just can't do that until you see interprovincial travel returned in a way that is secure and stabilized. And then again on the right, wanting to build back in a more effective way and make sure that we're very efficient when we do go out internationally. So if you advance that slide. The guiding, this time we're all running, things are moving very quickly. And when that happens, we've really had to rely on some guiding principles in order to make some decisions and draw up new frameworks and new partner agreements. But essentially, we're looking to make sure that we can match the funds with the provinces, that if needed, the work can be paused. What we want to do is build for the future. So we want to make sure any new content we're building, we have the rights to, and that we can help amplify it. The messaging is aligned to make sure that we're working effectively together. And eventually, as we said, ladders up to Canada for Glowing Hearts. And you already heard how well aligned the provincial and national marketing messages are. So if you advance one more. When we think about Canada for Glowing Hearts, we're not just talking about the geography of the place, but we're talking about the people and the kind of values that we're seeing appreciated more now than ever when you think about the social, cultural, economic, and environmental impacts of the visitor economy and how these values are grounded in Canada for Glowing Hearts. So if you advance one more. The reason that we need partner support in terms of working on a campaign is we cannot put something in place that would try to replace or overshout any community voices. We need those to come up first. And if you advance the slide one more, what we need to do is allow communities and ask them, what do you love about your city? What do you love about, what about an innovation that somebody's done in your industry? And what are the people doing and responding? And it's our job then to help amplify the different messages that are coming out from across the Manitoba as well as the country. So advance one more. And we're seeing it everywhere. This idea of how great and resilient Canadians are, this idea of these proud glowing hearts, it's very clear when people are singing from their balconies or showing content on ice sculptures. And it's really incredible how Canadians have responded. And if you advance one more slide, it's just our job really then to let those local stories come out even more as we begin to start to travel again, and ensure that we give all of those voices the time and attention that they deserve. So if you advance one more. We're also not too precious about the way that we're looking for format. We know that with that creativity comes an awful lot of use of everything from creating music to podcasts to posts on social. It's our job to curate it in and pull it together and use it, as I said, for a national program and one that can eventually, the content being used internationally. So if you advance one more. The idea then is going back to mapping when you're in that uncharted territory and mapping a recovery. We're on that left side right now, working with our partners, in particular Travel Manitoba, to help build up that content again and put it out there. And then as we move through different phases, we can use that content as we go forward. So if you advance it just one more. We're here to listen. We're here to pull in that content and amplify it. And that does mean paying a particular attention to community sentiment and understanding how far away visitors are coming and whether or not they'll be welcome and how they can travel safely. So if you advance one more. We know that the Canadians are pretty resilient, so let's show everybody what Canada for Glowing Heart means. Thank you very much. Merci à tous. And that's it for me. Happy to take questions later.
Awesome. Thank you, Gloria. And as I mentioned at the start of the session, this town hall was developed for you to ask questions directly to these industry leaders that have presented to us today on issues that are affecting your business and, of course, the tourism industry. Many of you submitted your questions in advance, and please continue to submit questions through the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. And I'll ask that the panel please keep your responses short. So we're going to go till about 10:30. We've got time for about 25 minutes worth of questions. So I'll ask the panel to keep your responses short, to the point, so we can get through as many as possible, and I'll do my best to direct them to the most appropriate person. So some great presentations. So really to start the questions, I think we've heard from a number of the presenters today, so obviously some of the challenges that are being impacted as a result of COVID-19. So maybe I'll throw this one out to Charlotte to begin. Charlotte, give us a sense as to what TIAC is doing to really help this government to understand the urgency and the dire situation that's facing the industry right now.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are in constant contact with the government on a daily and weekly basis, depending on the group. One of the things that is really that's very helpful for us, first of all, we're gathering data and we're able to present data. We're using also some research that's been done by DC. But the other thing is, for us, it's important to hear from stakeholders. And when we put out surveys, we are sharing those results in real time with decision makers. And there is a huge appetite from decision makers, whether it's Minister Joly or the finance minister or PMO. They want to know what's happening out there, and they want that data. So all I would say is please continue to give us information and also to provide us with information from surveys. We're also writing letters and doing a number of other things, and our recovery plan, of course, there's a whole variety of things that we're up to, but we need your input.
But Charlotte, is your sense that there's a good understanding about how challenged this industry is going to be from the federal government?
My sense is that they have a pretty good idea that it is a dire situation. I think they've been very much seized with putting relief packages together for Canada's population in total, regardless of sector, and that they focused an awful lot on that. And we are now urgently asking them to start shifting and looking at recovery and constantly reminding them this industry was the first hit, the hardest hit, and we're going to be the longest coming out. And I think they get that, but we need them to now take action.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Gloria, can I throw the next one to you? I'm wondering if you can provide us with a little bit more information on some of the resources and programs that are offered that are really relevant to small businesses they might be able to access through these challenging times.
Yeah, I would refer back to a lot of what Charlotte threw up on the screen in terms of where resources are. Same with Keith. In addition to that, what I would say is the regional development agencies. So WD for Manitoba is the regional development agency that's going to be investing in small businesses in the infrastructure. So that's an opportunity for some of the businesses. And then I would, in terms of what we do at Destination Canada, there's a lot of research that we have on our website that I think is very helpful. I was saying that signals recovery framework that can really help people get more information and make their own business decisions based on some evidence that perhaps they can't afford to collect themselves. And then just finally, the partnership with Travel Manitoba and being able to help promote what is open and what people are doing. We've done a lot talking about virtual tours so far, and then going forward, letting people know what's open, what's safe to do, and how to enjoy your province.
Thanks, Gloria. Keith, I wonder if I can throw the next one to you. In your presentation, you talked about some of the challenges obviously impacting Indigenous tourism across Canada. I believe the number you used was almost 53% of businesses being able to continue on, which obviously shows that there are some challenging times ahead. I wonder if you can maybe look at this from a Manitoba lens and provide us with a little bit of a comment on terms of the impact that COVID-19 has had on Indigenous operators right here in Manitoba.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of referenced a little bit of it in the presentation, but certainly the operators in Manitoba, what we hear and feel and see in the reporting so far, it's had significant impact. I mean, most of our businesses, especially the ones on reserve, they can't even open. I mean, it's not even an option. I know Manitoba seems to be phasing in faster than some of the other provinces in terms of reopening. We won't see that for many of our Indigenous businesses. It's simply impossible at this time. There's considerable safety concerns at the community level. So for us, even though there's excitement about reopening Manitoba, the fact is a lot of those businesses in Manitoba will be unable to reopen because of Indigenous leadership's concerns. So that's that added wrinkle. And I guess from going to some of the programming options, we keep asking the federal government, you ask specific programs. I just want to comment quickly. Indigenous tourism businesses can also access, for example, up to the $40,000 loans. I saw there was a question on there to see by the the Canada Emergency Business Account. Anyone can. We have Indigenous financial capital corporations in Manitoba that also deliver that program now. But $40,000 isn't enough for most of our operations to actually to completely refinance On the other side, businesses can also, access the BCAP, the Business Credit Availability Program. Those are two particular lending. And what we've been saying as part of our solutions for Manitoba and everywhere is that our businesses need to also consider a complete refinancing for the longer term. So the BCAP right now is a 6-month deferred first payment in 5 years. We're saying that amortization isn't long enough. We believe that tourism is going to need to grow. It's going to take 10 years to fully recover in this country for many of our businesses. That may be true for non-Indigenous, but certainly for some of our larger operations. They're not even going to be able to bring the revenues back into where they were for at least the next 2 to 3 years. So imagine adding the pressure now of another significant loan. So we are saying they need to refinance. That we are hoping some of that can be more forgiven, and we're hoping that, I think Charlotte brought it up, that the government of Canada can backstop 100%, because the second they get in the middle of it, they're not very fair to tourism refinancing to begin with. So that's very true for our businesses. So I'm saying in Manitoba for Indigenous tourism, these are the things we're trying to deal with. And I don't know if people realize, but even things like the wage subsidy program, which the government of Canada was also hoping that many of us in the tourism sector and Indigenous deal with, Indigenous on-reserve businesses didn't even qualify till last week. So these are big issues for us. And even things now, the rent relief, I think those are good things. But the reality was most of our Indigenous owned corporations on reserve don't even qualify for that rent relief. They say they've expanded the program yet, but we're already hearing people that are trying to access being told that they're not sure that they can qualify. So there's other programs, but I'm saying there is a series of programs. So that constant, what's happening in Manitoba with Indigenous businesses to the provincial government there, of course, federal, these are big challenges. That's why that 53, and I would actually argue, just to conclude on this, I think Manitoba is going to be hit hard for Indigenous tourism. There's about, give or take, we've been working closely with Travel Manitoba and reestablishing an Indigenous Tourism Association, getting a strategy. We're going to host the International Indigenous Tourism Conference there this year. There's a lot of significant history in Manitoba with the 150-year celebration this year. I'm not sure what's going to be left in the next 18 months there to really rebuild. A lot of the Indigenous tourism in Manitoba is based on major festivals and events. As we know, those things just simply won't be possible for some time. And can those businesses survive this is going to be the question. So pretty significant impacts.
Thanks, Keith. We've got a question from Louise Waldman that's come across to the Q&A portion. I just wonder if we can maybe touch upon that now. And it touches on the issue of interprovincial travel. And I know that's been an issue that's been raised over the last little while. And I guess maybe, Colin, I'll throw this one to you about the possibility for a jurisdiction like Manitoba, which has done relatively well in regards to keeping its numbers down, in terms of doing partnerships with other jurisdictions that have low numbers, like a New Brunswick or a Yukon, in terms of having sort of a cross-tourism opportunity for people to travel between provinces. Is that something you would look at? I know we've also had discussions just in terms of, opening up the border between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and obviously from an Ontario perspective. Is that something that we're looking at that we need to really have a focus on moving forward in these next phases, Colin?
Thank you, Chuck. It's a great question. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Obviously, a lot of this is going to, these decisions and the advancing of any of these initiatives are going to have a great impact on what's going to happen over the next short while, whether the numbers and caseloads continue to remain low. You heard from Gloria from Destination Canada talking about resident sentiment and what do people feel about opening those borders. There certainly has been discussion, I know, with the Canadian and US border. I think as it stands right now, they're going to relook at that as of June 21st. But there is no guarantee that it will open at that time. I think it's probably wise for us to look at those opportunities. As it stands right now, though, we don't have clearance from government or an indication from the government that those kinds of things are going to happen in the short term. So we'll keep monitoring that. And as I said earlier, we do have weekly meetings with the provincial government and, of course, with the federal government as well. So we're looking at those kinds of questions. I know that's probably not the answer that the individual was looking for. We continue to monitor it, but I think those are interesting opportunities. Manitoba's in a particularly good spot because we've done a great job of flattening the curve, and we have very low case numbers. And as to those other areas that were suggested in the question. So I think that's an opportunity, and that will more than likely start to happen in the restarting the third phase. but it is entirely possible it could happen in the second.
I'll throw this one open to whoever wants to take it. This one comes from Scott Duarte from Global News, who asks, what challenges will face the tourism sector as they try to rebound, obviously? Will people be nervous to spend money after layoffs, or they will be too scared to travel? So how do we rebuild some of that consumer confidence in terms of being able to move forward? So maybe I'll throw that one to Charlotte to start.
Well, that's definitely a very important question. And obviously, consumer confidence is going to be key in terms of restarting the travel economy. We've been working with a coalition of other associations representing the airlines and airports and hotels, and putting our heads together in terms of what is going to be needed next. We need to work with government, to actually put a recovery plan together so that there is certainty. And we also know that this industry has had a history of welcoming travelers, whether by air or in hotels or in attractions following other crises like 9/11 or SARS. So there is experience there. I think it is doable, but there has to be a plan in place. And I think that keeping people safe, they're going to want to know that they're going to be safe when they're traveling. Or if they're participating in activities, and it's going to be incumbent on us to really put that communication out there. So I think there's going to need to be a PR component to this, as well as some policies, and we all have to work together. So we are asking the federal government to bring us all together and start mapping out what that's going to have to look like. But it's absolutely key, I think, to the recovery. There's no question.
Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
I would just, it's Gloria, can you hear me?
Yep.
I would just build on what Charlotte said to add in. There's two things. One, we are seeing some similarities to the recovery from SARS, as well as 9/11, which is high-end luxury, private travel. There's a lot of demand, and we're seeing that in surges and surge. But people are, interestingly, there's a certain segment interested in paying a lot more to have exclusive occupation in a lodge, for instance, or small craft travels, private jet. And then the other piece in terms of getting spend back up, remember that the visitor economy includes business events. And in Winnipeg, you have some knowledge capital that is outstanding, I think, in cooperation with the University of Manitoba. So studies into nutrition and affordable foods, and you've attracted conferences and meetings in the past. Well, there's some very resilient sectors after COVID in terms of technology, et cetera. And as those business events, they will come back, maybe not in the shape that they were before, but they do bring in a lot of dollars into the communities, into the cities, as well as at different times of the year. So the visitor economy is pretty robust, and in terms of it's not just leisure.
Gloria, I've got another question that's come across through the chat, and it asked the question in terms of what types of information, including research, are being relied on to make those decisions regarding tourism, and they're wondering if they can access any of that data.
Yeah, so I know that both on Travel Manitoba's site, TIAC site, as well as Destination Canada's website, on our corporate site, there's the research that I referred to. So we do have an early study that you can download from Tourism Economics, and that maps out the impact. And Keith was mentioning how long it will take for recovery. What you see in those kinds of impact studies is the sectors broken down. So that might be helpful for some businesses, but then the other types of research that I said that are ongoing, I think are really critical, as well, as you can watch and see changes in everything from forward bookings, traveler sentiment, community sentiment. So watching those changes over time and being able to get that information without having to pay for it is going to be, I think, the answer to the question there.
Colin, let's throw one at you. Obviously, one of the things that's happened in Manitoba, a number of the festivals and larger events have been postponed for the remainder of this year. Do you have any sense in terms of, do you think there'll be an opportunity with smaller festivals? Is that going to be something we could look at in the fall, or are we still, is it too early to be able to make any kind of determinations around that?
It's a good question, Chuck. It's also a very tough one to answer. I would say that we're going to have to continue to follow the guidelines that are being put forward by the provincial government. Obviously, in the last short while, they have expanded, but they've expanded to 25 people inside and upwards of 50 people outside. So the numbers are still pretty small, and some of those cases they've yet to be implemented. But so if you are a really small festival, which I can't see that there are many, if any, in Manitoba that qualify with those kinds of numbers, I think I would kind of hang tough on this one for a bit and just see how things go over the next short while. It is anticipated that if we continue to have low case numbers or better yet, no case numbers, that there will be more loosening of some of the rules and regulations and the policies that are required to be put in place. If you're, I know that if you're a festival and you've got a September start date, and that probably wasn't a great answer, but more information is going to come forward in the weeks ahead and the weeks ahead of that. And so I would be cautious about how much you're investing in a festival at this point, but be cautiously optimistic that it could happen. But
what about even opening up the north in Manitoba, Colin? I know that's been a challenge, the 53rd.
Well, opening up the north, that has been under discussion as well. In the recent release that came forward, I think just last week from the provincial government, they are looking at the opportunity of opening 53 and north of 53 in the next short while. And again, that decision is going to be finalized based on case counts and caseloads and concerns. And so I think I would continue to watch the information coming out of the provincial government on a daily basis. We will also be broadcasting that. We are also talking to a lot of the operators north of 53 because they're asking us that same question. But it is anticipated that there will be more movement on that in the next short while.
We are running out of time. We've got a little bit of time left, and I'm just wondering if I can maybe get everybody to give me sort of a 30-second sort of wrap up. And I'm curious, we've got close to 200 participants on the line, a lot of small business owners, tourism operators in the province. What kind of a message do you send to them today about what kind of optimism they need to have going forward in this industry? Maybe I'll start with Keith on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of reason we have to build, we will survive this. I mean, from Indigenous tourism, we'll be releasing a recovery plan. I didn't speak to that, but we're just putting the finishing touches on a more comprehensive recovery plan that's hopefully going to help reassure Indigenous communities in Manitoba and elsewhere that, of course, that, tourism is an important part of the future of their economy. And let's think about how we're going to, rebound from this. Secondly, we're also, the recovery phase will also be working with the, roughly about 70 to 80 businesses in Manitoba that actually make sure they can meet the minimal requirements that the health authorities are asking of COVID preparation. That's a big issue for us, the planning and making sure that they have the right PPE and these sorts of, the policies and procedures. So that's a big part of the recovery. So a lot of work's being undertaken, although it is a challenge right now. There certainly is a lot of work being done to mitigate and rebuild for the future. And we know there's going to be a future. So, Indigenous communities aren't going anywhere. Our businesses aren't going anywhere. We just got to figure out how we're going to be able to restart. And right now, although there's big challenges, our plan will hopefully identify a series of investments and issues that we're going to mitigate. So yeah, I think it's it's a challenge right now, but we will get through this and we will rebuild.
Gloria, 30 seconds.
I would say, in signs of hope, I've never seen a better, stronger collaboration of the tourism partners across this country. And together we're going to continue to look and gain evidence, not just about what's sort of happening right now, but to get insights for businesses about what resilience means in the future. So what sectors are thriving, what business resilience really means, and how you can come through this perhaps even stronger.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I do believe we will get out of this. It may be a long ride. And we know that a lot of businesses are hurting, but I want people to know that we are here helping them on a daily basis. We want to hear from them. And we want to continue to hear about the issues that they are having, either accessing programs. The other thing I want to ask people to do, and I think that they can help us out here, is, you know, this week is, I know we're not in a celebratory mood this week, but it is Tourism Week. You can go on tourismmatters.ca and send a letter to your MP through that program. You know, bolster our advocacy efforts, telling them why this sector is so darn important to this country and why they need to support and help us get through this. And then, of course, we have turned our attention, as I mentioned earlier, to recovery, and we're working together. And to Gloria's point, we are all working together. I've never seen such great collaboration at all levels, which is fantastic. So we're going to continue to do that. And I agree also with Keith. We will get through this. It's going to be tough, but we will get through this, and we've got to do it together.
Colin, take us home with the fastest 30 seconds in tourism.
Whoa. Chuck, you know, it takes me 30 seconds to say hello. Let's not forget the fact that Manitoba in 2019 was recognized by media giant Lonely Planet as one of the top 10 places in the world to visit. So here is your opportunity, Manitobans, to get out and explore your own backyard. Show Manitoba a little bit of love. As things continue to open up and opportunities continue to improve, and as consumer confidence continues to improve, we're in a very good position to recapture a lot of our revenue loss, given the fact that a high percentage of our revenues are generated by Manitobans traveling throughout the province. So it's a great province. Lonely Planet acknowledged that already, and I of course know it well as well. But this is a great opportunity to explore your own backyard. So get out and travel this amazing province. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, we run out of time. I'd like to thank you for joining this town hall, for submitting questions. For those that did not have your question answered live, we'll send them to the panel and ask that they reply to you directly by email. Once again, thank you to the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, Destination Canada, and Travel Manitoba for putting on this session, and a big thank you to our participants. And before we say goodbye, with the support from the Government of Canada's Canadian Experience Fund, CEF, TIAC has launched a new program, Elevating Canadian Experiences. This is a how-to workshop series focused on tourism recovery through culinary and shoulder seasons development. The program has launched a series of online workshops across Canada to provide capacity building and support for tourism businesses in developing shoulder and winter seasons and culinary as part of their recovery and resilience. Visit elevatingcanadianexperiences.ca for more information.
In times of crisis like this, Canadians have been coming together like never before. But in this global context, tourism industries have taken the brunt of the shock. Economies will recover and people will travel again, and we want you to be ready to welcome them when it's time. To get back on our feet, Canada needs to support its tourism industry, an industry with a presence from coast to coast to coast, and traditionally representing nearly 1 in 10 Canadian jobs. Canada is full of untapped potential and is usually one of the world's most visited destinations during the summer months. But with only 1% of visitor activities being winter-based, there is so much of Canada left untouched. In our workshops, you will learn to grow culinary and seasonal opportunities in your own backyard. During peak times, Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta account for 87% of Canada's tourism employment, with food tourism playing a crucial role, especially during times of uncertainty. We have the opportunity to work on building and strengthening Canada's tourism industry to recover jobs and resuscitate the economy. The Tourism Industry Association of Canada proudly presents the Elevating Canadian Experiences workshop program, the how-to workshop series to recover Canadian tourism through culinary and shoulder season development.
Thank you for joining us for today's town hall. Thank you to all our panelists, and especially to Chuck Davidson for leading this discussion today. I'd also like to thank our Town Hall Series sponsors, Meetings Means Business Canada, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, WestJet, and Air Canada. Take care and stay well.